head back to this hearing in Florida for defendant Gerald Radford. He is accused of a hate crime for killing a gay man by the name of John Walt. But there's more to this story. One was a Democrat, one was a Republican. They met at a dog park every day, it seems, for months, even years. They hated each other. One ended up dead. The other is now accused of murder. Let's go back in.
Hi, Mr. Gumpert. Are you familiar with a place called West Dog Park?
Yes.
Is that a place you frequent?
Yes.
How long you been going there?
About 6 years.
And in those 6 years, did you come to know a guy by the name or the nickname of Deck?
Yes.
Can you see him here in the courtroom?
Yes.
Could you please point to him and describe what he's wearing?
He's wearing an orange outfit.
And I'd ask the record reflect that he's identify the defendant?
Yes. Yes.
How did you come to know Deck?
Over a longer period of time, I would enter the dog park and just traverse around through the park, and I got a new dog that was much more sedentary. So I became more familiar with him approximately about the beginning of 2022. So that's how long it's been that I've really known him as a person.
So about 2 years.
Yeah.
And how did you get along with him?
Initially, I got along well, and then after time, it didn't turn out too good.
Why is that?
His behavior was very radicalized towards. He was being very mean-spirited. He was a very bigoted discussion about politics and people and sexuality, and it became so much overbearing for me that I would not really be addressing or being around him at all.
Okay.
About 6 or 8 months ago, that started.
And when you say 6 or 8 months ago, do you mean from before Walt was killed?
Before Walt, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so Walt dies in February, so you don't mean 6 or 8 months from now.
That's correct, yes.
All right. And so somewhere 6 to 8 months before Walt is killed, and I guess let's talk about that. Do you know someone named Walt?
Yes.
Who's Walt?
Walter Lay was another attendee, regular attendee, daily attendee at the dog park.
And were there like a handful of you all that were kind of regular attendees? Maybe not every single day, but like, she had like a little social clique of people?
About 3 or 4 days a week, typically, you'd see everyone in the group, and I was there probably 6 days a week.
All right. And so did you come to interact with lots of the other people who go to the dog park and knew Deck?
Yes.
And so were you aware of his reputation amongst the people at the dog park?
Yes, because it was physical, of people avoiding him and staying away from him.
And was that always the way it was? Was it always avoiding him, or did that occur?
No, I think really within about a period of, from the time of Walt's death was February, so going back in time to about July when there was a little incident, and at that point it became very, very unpleasant to be around. And for me and other people too, it kind of like vacated that area, which I'll call the pavilion, which is where everyone would sit under, it was rain, cold, or sunshine, or hot, or whatever it was during what time of year, but that's...
So there was a group of you who would sit at the pavilion, and at some point, a good number of you decided to go somewhere else and sort of divide the group.
Well, it would be as much that for myself speaking is that I felt threatened, and he was threatening other people too. And Walt was a friend, and when somebody threatens your friend, it had that effect upon me, me wanting to be away. It wasn't necessarily because I was really close with Walt, terribly close or anything, but I felt uncomfortable being around Deck with that going on in any case. And I would go to another table to sit down. In
those moments where you happen to see any sort of aggression or hostility from Deck aimed towards Walt, how did Walt react? Did he become violent?
No.
Did he become threatening?
No.
I mean, was he a generally peaceful person?
Very mild-mannered and very dismissive of any pressure against him.
On the day that Walt died, did Walt happen to be in possession of one of your dogs?
Yes.
Tell us how that came about.
On Tuesday of the, I'm sorry, this is, I believe it was either Tuesday or Wednesday. Friday was the morning of the incident, and so I was returning home. So it would have been Tuesday morning. He had my dog, and I left him off there, and at that time, that was the last time I saw Walt, too. He was alive. We were not at the dog park. I was dropping my dog off at the, with Walt to watch for me. I was going to visit my mom, who's recently passed, but she was in Naples, Florida. He kept the dog for 2 nights, and he had my dog and took him to the dog park just like it was his dog.
Okay. So were you supposed to come home on Friday and get your dog back?
Yes, yes.
Just never worked out that way.
That's correct.
But Walt was responsible for your dog that day, so he took your dog to the dog park just like he took his own dog?
I think he probably went to the dog park because he knew my dog needs to go, and he took him to the dog park where they always go, and that was it.
Thank you, sir.
In the time leading up to February 2nd of 2024, okay, I know you mentioned aggressive behavior and things that made you uncomfortable and whatnot. Did you ever see anything between Mr. Lay and Mr. Radford where they came to blows?
No.
Any physical fight? And I'm not referring about arguing.
Yeah. No.
Never got physical.
No. There was I would say an intent to block Mr. Lay's progression walking around that circular part of the park where he would intercede between them, but there was no touching, no pushing, no hitting, no nothing.
Okay. You said you were there about 6 days a week. What time would you arrive?
Usually 8 o'clock.
Was Mr. Radford usually there?
Yes, 8 a.m. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Was Mr. Radford usually there before you?
About the same time, usually just before or very close to that time frame. Probably about 3 times. I'm thinking he probably just more than half. He would be there ahead of me, or very close to the time when I would be getting there. I'm retired, so it's a pretty steady time frame. Yeah.
But for you being out of town, you would have been there that morning.
That'd be correct.
I don't have any further questions.
Well, he asked you. Sorry.
Go ahead.
He asked you about it. So, did you see some sort of incident where the defendant blocked the path of Walt?
Yes.
What is that about?
In the circular around the edge of the dog park, it's a pretty big park. He walked around it as part of their regular walking. He was walking, and then right directly in front of.
Who was walking?
Your Honor,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to object to this question. I didn't ask him about an incident. I asked if he ever witnessed physicality.
All right, overruled.
Right at the pavilion, right directly aside from the pavilion. We're sitting at the pavilion, and he was walking around. He went and got in his path. I'm sorry.
Use names.
I'm sorry, please. I'm sorry, Your Honor. Mr. Radford went from the sitting position in the pavilion to walking over to interceding him, to stopping him from walking, and standing.
Interceding Walt?
Interceding Walt. Yes,
Okay,
I'm
hang on
sorry.
a minute. Just slow down just a second.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
That's all right.
I'm sorry.
Take a breath. It's okay.
Okay.
So you saw an incident where Mr. Radford was fully seated, decided to get up and walk right into the path
Yes.
of Mr. Lay.
Yes.
And what transpired?
He confronted him and stopped him from walking.
And when you say he, who's confronting?
Okay, that was confronting Walt.
Okay. And was he doing it politely?
No,
Was he doing it aggressively?
aggressively.
And what did people do in response?
Well, a lot of head shaking by myself and the others who were around there, and response was very negative.
Okay, but it didn't come to blows.
No.
Did Walt start threatening
No.
Deck?
No. Walt tried to sidestep to the right, and then Declan sidestepped to the right, then he sidestepped to the left. And it was like this, what do you want? What do you want? And that was like the end of it, because I think that was where it stopped at that point.
Thanks, sir.
And was, before that, you said Mr. Radford was seated?
I believe that was yes.
Okay, and was he seated with all of you all?
Well, I think it was about 4 of us total at that time.
All right. And did you say in July, July before the February incident, that something happened and you all kind of didn't hang out together?
That's yes.
What happened in July?
As I recall, it was there was a confrontation, and Mr. Radford was berating Walt and about his sexuality, and that he was a liar, and don't trust this guy. And he said all of these things sort of in a, I'm going to say, nonstop tirade, every chance he got to, for about a course of about 20 minutes or 15 minutes, sometime like that. And at that point, in frustration, I believe, Mr. Lay stood up and said, "It looks to me like we're going to come to blows someday about this." And that's what I recall. At that point, Mr. It was more of I believe it was out of total frustration with being pushed around so much. And that at that point, that was the last time that Walter Lay sat at the pavilion or was in the pavilion at all, ever again, because he had been...
Last time Walt or...
No, Walt no longer went and sat in the pavilion, and he separated himself completely from Deck and stayed away from him from that point forward.
And what did Mr. Lay say in response to the 15-minute tirade?
That's when he stood up and said, "It looks like we're going to come to blows someday about this," but not really specific about what this was. More about the berating atmosphere, continually berating and degrading atmosphere. Liar. No. Other degradations. And Walt just very quietly walked away and never came to there again. I along with some other people, eventually I'm handicapped, and this man was not threatening me directly, saying I'm going to do anything to you, but the atmosphere at that pavilion was so, I'm going to use the term, acidic or poisonous, whatever you want. I could no longer go there. If there were a rainstorm or something to that effect, I would, and I was there by myself. I got there at the same time Walt wasn't there. I wouldn't go to the pavilion and sit with Deck because he's too abusive. I was finished with the man. There's no more I could take from him to my friends or anybody else. So I retreated over there.
All right, wow, this is quite the story. Again, that's a stand your ground hearing. It took place while we were doing another trial. We're going to get you back this afternoon for more of it. It's fascinating. We'll see what the judge decides.